Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. Today we are talking about emotional intelligence in leadership and 5 skills that most leaders skip, overlook, maybe don't have awareness around, or maybe are just underdeveloped in their emotional intelligence kind of arsenal. When we think about emotional intelligence, we want to always be thinking first and foremost about how we recognize emotion, how we can name emotion, how we self-regulate around emotion, and then how do we also hold empathy for those who are navigating their emotions around us. And those are kind of the cornerstones or the main touch points of emotional intelligence, is that recognition, self-awareness around it, then looking at how we self-regulate our emotions, especially in tough moments, and then being able to hold space for others as they're doing the same with a good degree of empathy. But there's other more nuanced skills that sometimes we just don't have awareness around. And especially if we are in either heightened moments or uncomfortable or unusual environments, there's things that can just kind of slip past us. And a lot of times those are things where we think after the fact, how could I have done that different? How could I have done that better? Or maybe there's situations where other people are experiencing a situation very differently from us, and we don't know how to address it. So let's dig into some of those leadership skills around emotional intelligence that might be getting missed and might not be on your radar. So the first skill is emotional labeling and being able to name what's happening in a space and put it out there. So a lot of times we feel a certain thing in a room. We'll notice that there's tension in a room. We'll notice that there's maybe some uncomfortable emotions happening. And a lot of times we either ignore it or we power through, but we don't put words to it. We don't bring it out into the open. And what can happen if we don't name what we're experiencing is we can miss an opportunity for people to be better connected to what's happening in live time. So when we say, I'm noticing there's some tension, or I'm noticing some hesitation, or I'm noticing that, maybe some people are seeming a little more quiet than usual. I want to note that this is a hard conversation. I want to share that this might feel uncomfortable to you, or maybe this feels uncomfortable to me, but it's important to me that we talk about it. So naming some of these things and letting it be out there can oftentimes bring more comfort for you and bring more comfort for other people. Sometimes we think we need to just bulldoze through this without bringing any attention to it. And at that point, we often are kind of undermining the humanity of the moment. And more often than not, when we bring humanity to the situation, when we say, like, I know this feels uncomfortable, or I feel a little uncomfortable right now, or this feels vulnerable, when we name those things, it helps everyone feel at ease because people feel held and they feel seen and they feel like, oh, this person gets it. So this is really important. It also puts us in the place of being able to label an emotion to help diffuse some of the intensity, and sometimes help diffuse some of maybe even the cognitive dissonance that people are feeling, where they might be feeling like, I'm supposed to be acting like nothing's happening, but really I feel like there is something happening. And maybe you're feeling that as a leader, but it also could be that other people in the room are feeling that as well. So thinking through, when something feels off, how can you call it out in order to call people in? That's emotional intelligence that also brings care and comfort to the room that you're in. The second skill is self-regulation under pressure rather than suppression or ignoring the thing that you're feeling. So a lot of times we think that emotional intelligence means that we need to stay calm at all costs, and that's, quote unquote, emotional regulation. And then we suppress the thing that we're really feeling. And that's not necessarily regulation. Sometimes that's performance. And sometimes we need to be able to say the thing that we're feeling that's really strong. And sometimes we need to be able to acknowledge what it is. And so it's okay to say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I'm feeling really triggered. I'm feeling whatever the thing might be. It's also important to notice for yourself, and sometimes you're not saying this out loud, but noticing if you're feeling physiological feelings, being able to connect to why you're feeling that way. So this actually comes up for me a lot when I'm feeling uncomfortable. So if I'm going into a situation where I think someone's upset with me, or I'm going into a situation where maybe I have to get on a stage in front of a bunch of people and I feel a little bit nervous because I want to do a really good job. Recognizing that the reason maybe I feel like my stomach is really tense, or the reason I'm feeling like my heart is racing, it's because I really care about this situation. I want to do a good job, or I want to take good care of the person that I'm going into this uncomfortable conversation with. So a lot of times for me, self-regulating isn't about ignoring or trying to stay calm or trying to override an emotion or suppress an emotion. It's about recognizing, oh, you're feeling this because you really care right now. This is important to you. And that's a good thing. It's good that this is important. It shows that you care about doing a good job, or it shows that you care about the person in the situation that you're having to enter into. So when we can react from that place and understand what's in that moment and why it holds gravity for us, then it gives our body, or it gives our brain a minute to catch up with our body and recognize why we're feeling what we're feeling. And that can help us regulate. That can help us recognize, like, okay, now that I'm understanding why I'm feeling this way or what's coming up, now I can move forward from a place of honoring that rather than trying to just stuff it down and ignore it. The third skill is reading the room. So in reading the room, we're doing some emotional sensing of things. And a lot of times we are really paying close attention to what the subtext is, to what's not being said. So what gets missed here is that sometimes if we're so focused on the content or what's being said out loud or what's right in front of us, we miss the what's happening in the air. We miss the undercurrent. And we miss some of what's happening if we were to try to read between the lines. So what we want to be looking for in this skill is scanning the room, scanning for people's body language, scanning for nonverbal cues, scanning for how energy maybe has shifted, scanning for where there's patterns of silence or withdrawal, people backing out or people, disengaging. And scanning for what we are seeing and then naming it. Going back to skill number 1, I noticed some people are, less engaged than you were this morning, or I noticed some people are starting to shut down. One of the things I notice in trainings a lot of times is as people feel, what people do with their body when they feel uncomfortable, what people do with their bodies when it's midday, like right after lunch, or as we get closer to the end of a day. So if I'm doing like a full day event, I start noticing around 4:00, I'm like, people are really done. And so if I just try to be like, here's more and more content, that can really make people check out even more quickly. So being intentional and noticing, okay, if people are checking out, it seems like we need to get our energy up. It seems like we need to get out of our seats. It seems like we need to change gears a little bit here. Noticing if there's tension in a room, what's happening, and maybe checking in with people one-on-one. This happened recently. I was at a training and I could tell that someone was really struggling. What I was sensing was that someone was either annoyed with the whole room or annoyed with the person they were sitting next to. There were some shifts in their body language, and I was like, something's going on here. And so when we went to lunch, we broke for lunch that day on that training day, I just went over to that person and I was like, hey, I just want to check in. Are you doing okay? Is there anything I can do for you? I noticed that you had your hand. This person literally was holding their hand up. It looked like up against their face, like they were trying to block their vision from the person next to them. And so I said, I noticed you had your hand up and I just wanted to check in with you and make sure you're good. And she was able to explain, oh, here's what was happening. Here's what's going on. Thank you for checking in. But scanning for those little things can show care, and it can show people that you want to meet them where they're at, that you want to be observant, and that you want to take that extra time to understand what's happening in the room, and sometimes understand how different people are impacting others in the room. So not just listening to what's being said, but really looking for the tone in the room and the tone between people, in case you might need to make some adjustments, in case you might need to shift things a bit, in case you might need to pause things in order to acknowledge what's happening. The fourth skill is holding space without needing to be the fixer. And so practicing holding space without needing to be the person that knows all the things or can fix all the things. And this can be a tricky one if you're someone who feels the need to constantly add value. And this is something that I struggle with because I do feel like I want to always be adding value, but sometimes the value is in holding the space. And so here what we see happening is that someone shares something that's hard, or someone, shares a story, and the leader wants to jump in and fix it or offer solutions, help them reframe it into something positive. They want to be helpful, and that comes from a good place. But sometimes that's not what the person who's sharing is looking for. And if we're giving the person something that they're not looking for, that they haven't given us consent to offer, sometimes that can be really off-putting. So recognizing how can you listen really intentionally, acknowledge what someone's feeling. So they share something with you and you acknowledge back, hey, I hear you saying XYZ. It sounds like you're feeling, upset or overwhelmed or really anxious about this. Do I have that right? So always ending with a question that opens the door to them and resisting that urge to fix something in the moment. You can always say, it sounds like you're really frustrated. It sounds like you're whatever this feeling is. Tell me more about that. Again, opening the door to hear more, asking questions that let them get it all out. And then asking, what kind of support do you want? Do you want me? Would it be most helpful if I just listen right now? Do you want my take on this? Do you want advice? Do you want support that looks like a certain kind of support right now? This matters because this allows us to let people feel heard first and not shift it into us needing to be centered in terms of fixing something for them. This also allows people to share without feeling like when they share, it becomes someone else's burden to do something about it. So thinking through how can you get better at holding space and not always needing to fix everything for someone else, to let some things just belong to that person and trust that if they want something more from you, that they have the emotional maturity to ask for that. And then the fifth skill is repairing ruptures. And this one is hard because it requires us to be vulnerable and it requires us to sometimes admit like, hey, I think I got that wrong. Hey, I think I might have screwed up. Hey, like I wanted to check in about something. So in this one, where things get missed is when a leader says the wrong thing or misunderstands the situation or maybe makes someone feel unseen or unheard, and then they move on and they don't acknowledge it. And oftentimes when we move on and don't acknowledge it, we're just hoping, we're like, maybe the other person didn't notice. But the thing is they did. Or sometimes they didn't notice. And for them to be able to tell us that is really important for us to be able to move on. So the skill here is being able to go back and say, hey, I've been thinking about the thing you said yesterday, or I've been thinking about the dynamic. I've been thinking about whatever this thing was, yesterday, the day before. I don't feel great about this thing that I said, or I feel like I might have said something that could have been misinterpreted, or I feel like, it felt like maybe, the thing that I said was, that it made you uncomfortable or made you shut down. And I just want to check in. Can we revisit that? Is there anything that you're still holding on to? Is there anything you want me to know? Like, let's talk it through. And sometimes there wasn't actually a rupture. Sometimes there's nothing to repair. And they say, oh, no, like you misunderstood. And you can say, okay, great. It's important to me that I double check on these kinds of things. It's important to me that you feel taken care of. So, and then that's like a great way to build trust for someone to just understand and get that validation that like, you're a safe person. And then other times they'll say like, oh yeah, you said that and it reminded me of this other thing, or it made me get mad about this other, brought up something else. Or, I didn't like your tone, or whatever the feedback is. And recognizing that in that moment, that's just for you to receive and hear and understand. Like, oh, maybe that wasn't my best. Or maybe it's not what that person needed. Maybe you didn't do anything really like technically wrong, but it's just not what someone needed, or it's not, it wasn't helpful to someone in a moment and it triggered something in them. So where psychological safety actually is built in that moment is in you going back and saying, oh, okay, what I'm hearing is that this, created this feeling for you, or, oh, you interpreted it this way. And for you to understand that whatever happened, that you have their perspective now. And now that you understand their perspective, you can do something with that. You can recognize that, oh, okay, now I understand that more clearly. And it's important to me to clear the air. It's important to me to understand, what you were experiencing so that I make sure that I'm not doing something harmful. Or if you did, it's important for me to understand because I want to make sure that I don't do that again. I care enough about you that I don't want to keep making the same mistake over and over again. I want to be able to fix this. I want to be able to apologize. I want to do better next time. And to be grateful in those moments when you practice that vulnerability to say, I want to come back and fix this or repair this, and someone shares, to not get defensive, to not downplay or try to sidestep what they bring to you, but instead to say, thank you so much. I understand that differently now, or I understand that better. It's really helpful for me to get this information from you, or it's helpful for me to know this context, to be grateful for that information, accept it as objective information. It's someone else's experience. So accept it objectively, and then recognize what's yours to own and how you want to move forward with that. This is going to go so far in being able to build that safety. And sometimes the best way to build psychological safety is to work through ruptures like this. If you don't ever have to repair, people don't know that they can trust you when things get rough. And so while it can be really uncomfortable, it can also be a great path in building bridges with communication and trust and safety when you have to go back and do this. And so thinking through, is there something that you've been holding on to where maybe you didn't honor it in the way that you wanted to? Is there something that you want to go back to and honor, like, hey, this didn't go how I wanted, or I feel like you have something to add here in terms of how you experience this, and I would love to hear. Thinking back to how you can go back and honor a situation where you might be able to build a better path forward with someone, or heal some harm that was done and own your part in it, and be in a stronger position with that person or that group after the fact. While that's not uncomfortable, that is how we build that strength and we build that trust. When you think about the relationships that you have in your life that are the most trusted relationships, they're probably the relationships where you've had the most damage and repair done, for you to understand that we can get messy with each other and we can figure it out and we can keep going because we care enough about each other to fix it when we get it wrong. We care enough about each other to do better the next time around. That's how that trust can be built. So when you're thinking through where you might be missing some of these emotional intelligence skills, where you can advance your leadership and advance that emotional intelligence in your leadership, recognizing how elevating your emotional intelligence is just as important in helping you build these strong, trusting, and psychologically safe relationships that aren't vulnerable as it is for you to be building strong, trusting relationships where vulnerability is always on display, where you're admitting and copying to and talking about these inevitable mistakes that we're all going to make mistakes. And how do we then navigate the mistakes or navigate the weird and wonky moments and bring humanity to those moments? Because those are the moments, that's the time when the trust is built. And when we can navigate those times, when we can be really human with each other, that's what allows us to advance our ability to coexist and collaborate at the next level in the next season. So these are the things that are really necessary in our leadership development that are going to allow us to take our leadership to the next level and allow us to get better as we move forward. It's also how we model to others how leadership can be done. And this part is really, really important because people don't have a lot of models of emotional intelligence. They don't have a lot of examples of highly emotional intelligent leaders to be following. So when they can watch you do it, when they can watch how you're navigating getting it wrong, how you're navigating, calling out the tension in a room, how you're navigating holding space for someone, then they are more likely to lead in the same way. They're more likely to take that risk and be vulnerable in the same way and do better, just like you're doing better. And this part is really key. This is how our leadership ultimately has ripples over time, that it's not just about us trying to stay as comfortable as possible and avoid those uncomfortable situations. Because when we get in those uncomfortable situations, we challenge ourselves to be vulnerable. It creates opportunities for other people to give themselves permission to be vulnerable. And that's how we all start evolving in our leadership and bring others along with us so that we're rising together and modeling a different kind of leadership, modeling a different way of doing things and building systems that serve humans in better ways. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you feel like you have some new skills you can test out. Save this episode to listen to the next time you're in a sticky moment and you're feeling like maybe you're missing something when it comes to your emotional intelligence, your ability to read the room, your ability to kind of figure it out, call it out, and move forward. Share this episode out with other leaders in your network. And thank you for being here. I can't wait to be back next week. And until then, I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.